what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train, episode 187. Am I right? 177. I thought it was 178, and then I switched the numbers. Anyways, so, let me actually wrangle up the question on this one. I was not on the ball. But let me say for a minute, all the work on this episode you've already seen the fruits of. It's the kind of thing where, 174 was where the question was asked. It's the kind of thing where what happened was, this episode was all filmed before episode 3 of the Iron Horseman Chronicles came out, because we were missing a significant portion of the area, and in fact, I did even more that isn't in this video, but it's almost all gorge texturing. It's the kind of stuff that we hadn't gotten done yet. And there was a hell of a lot of it, and even then in the episode you can see the shoddy texturing every once in a place. It's kind of all over. And, not the shoddies in the areas that were done badly, just the areas that weren't done. Whew. Thankfully we were able to use our camera skills and try to keep most of that out of it. Anyways, so this week's question is, let me find it in specifics. It was asked by a guy with the username Delta Gaming. Where are you? What happened to Michigan? Did the state hold its own? So, I'm going to take a moment to talk about what holding its own really means. First, with the notion that the zombies and things like that, they really operated, outside of state borders. And especially the people as well. They didn't much care for, the Canadian-U.S. border in Detroit. And what's the town on the other side? Windsor is its companion town in Canada. So, they would sort of merge together as one if there had been any sort of livability there. Now the problem was the place was obviously run down. It was kind of, as you know, Detroit in 2012 was not exactly the greatest city in the world. It's the biggest one, or it's one of the most important worth talking about here. Very close to Fort Wayne, and of course the Fort Wayne Historical Society was where we got 765, who we eventually gave to the Toronto Rail Lands. But we did a pretty good job of avoiding Detroit as best we could, because despite being kind of run down, it's still immensely densely populated, and despite having a population which, not to generalize too terribly, but it really wasn't the nicest place, and you'd think they'd be able to hold their own against zombies, but they really had more of a problem holding their own against one another than anything else at that point in time. And so that led to problems, and the zombies just sort of compounded things, and very soon Detroit was stripped of pretty much all supplies and left as a kind of dead wasteland. Now, the area around it is fairly flat. Michigan is fairly flat, and to the south you have Indiana, western Ohio, and down into Kentucky, and then it moves into the Great Plains as you go farther west from there. Or, that is part of the Great Plains. And as I've talked about before, zombies were a terrible problem on the Great Plains, because there was nothing stopping their line of sight except for the curvature of the earth in a lot of cases. And zombies have fairly heightened senses, in a sense. I mean, obviously they're pretty numb to a lot of things, especially pain, but they have, I don't think they have a sixth sense. And again, if you check out the Zombie Survival Guide, you can read a lot about this. Max Brooks knows what he's talking about. But it was the kind of thing where they will know you're there before you know they're there, usually. Unless you really get the drop on them and you're moving very quietly and very slowly. And that sort of thing. One of the things they have excellent hearing, among other things. Being in the dark is not much of an impairment to a zombie. It is to a human, though. Anyways, so the citizens, the dead citizens of Detroit, the river between Lake Erie and Lake Huron up here. What river is this? But that acted as a fairly decent barrier between Canada and the U.S., basically. Not to say that Windsor wasn't in terrible trouble due to the fact that they were on the other side of the river from many, many, many zombies, but they were able to get the hell out of Dodge, and later the Toronto Railline sort of pushed in that direction. They never took over Detroit. There was never really any want or necessity to take over Detroit. What ended up happening was the town of Lansing, actually, was what became sort of a base of operations because it's very central to Michigan, and we were able to do quite a bit with the farm situation up there in Michigan. Once we were able to clear a lot of it out, we quarantined the cities, but there weren't too many major contingents of survivors. A lot of them had moved up to the north of Michigan. There was a fairly significant group of survivors on Bayous Blanc Island, because it's separated from the mainland, of course, and is also fairly close to the mainland. Again, islands sort of became important, for lack of a better word. And a lot of these shoreside settlements, they could do pretty well. I will mention for a moment that zombies and just anything... Well, first of all, only humans can survive with the Solanum virus in them, and by survive I mean get zombified. Everything else straight up dies. If a zombie bites a rabbit, the rabbit's dead. A zombie bites a deer or a moose or a bear. If they get infected with the virus, they're dead. They're not... They don't have any chance to come back as a zombie bear. But... And due to this, I believe, animals have a very strong impulse to get the hell away from a zombie or anything with Solanum, with a Solanum infection at all. And, that's worth mentioning. That's really something. If you have a dog with you and you see the dog scatter, that's a good sign that, hey, follow that dog, get the hell out of Dodge. And there were a couple of little towns up there that did have a contingent, but again, if you were on the mainland, you were more or less boned, if you didn't have any water between you. So this is the whole area, Michigan, Indiana, most of Ohio, Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, even down into Louisiana, although, down there it gets tougher for zombies to get through things like the bayou. But especially in those middle states, especially in places like Tornado Alley, where there's a lot of flat land, there's going to be a lot of zombies. And not even a lot like you see a bunch. But when you see one, you see thousands, or tens or hundreds of thousands. Because they've grouped together, and they've grouped up, and, if there's one zombie that sees one human and it moans, the zombie moans carry a really great distance. They don't have a lot of volume to them, but they manage to carry immensely. And they will alert all the other zombies in the area to, hey, there's food here, and then you'll get 20 zombies converging on one location where otherwise one would be, and then they find one more person, and groups of 20 zombies end up crowding towards the same location. It just multiplies and multiplies. And a lot of, this is an aside, but during the Zombie Train Incorporated, a lot of the things that we needed to build, we decided to use bricks for, because they're very durable and they last a long time, and concrete's a pain. And wood is renewable, but we didn't really have the manpower or the land area to do forestry. And, clear-cutting areas, not to say that, oh, save the trees, man, but it's also difficult. To have an industrialized setup where we're just mass-producing bricks, making brick buildings, is a lot easier than making several hundred log cabins for your town. And a lot of the Adirondacks and the Appalachians and stuff like that, we tried to get some forestry operations going, and, out there in eastern Ohio and stuff like that, where it's flat and covered in trees. Those were the easiest places to do it, where you have flat and covered in trees. Unfortunately, most of the places that are covered in trees that are left are not flat. And, Michigan was none of these. I don't know. I'm getting distracted not talking about Michigan. But, out there on the Great Plains, around the Mississippi River is a great place to get clay. And that ran into a lot of problems. You had a bailout of people out of, one of the little encampments south of St. Louis. They had a real panic, and they lost about half of their staff due to just being unable to get out of there in time. There was no vehicle that could transport everyone, and that was a sincere lack of foresight. It was also a lack of hindsight, because I talked about Bayous Blanc earlier, and the rail line, where's the rail line that runs into the north here? Is there one? I remember having real trouble getting up to the North Shore there, and yeah, there isn't one. That's kind of weird. But, Petoskey it must have been, or, what is this other place? Gaylord. Now, I would remember going to a town called Gaylord. What is this, a bike path? That's a bike path. Damn it, guys. Yeah, but yeah, that's what led to the problem. We were trying to get people to and from, Mackinac City to ride the boat out to Bayous Blanc. And the tiny, tiny town out here, if you can even call it that, I don't even know what it's called, it's just a handful of little buildings, that exploded. Bayous Blanc is treed, and that, talk about forestry, they went nuts. I think it's mostly cedar, and it's kind of swampy, but they did their best. Mackinac, which is a nearby island, was sort of used as a transfer point, but that rapidly became too dangerous. Because I do recall that the island was zombified, and then, not the island itself, of course, but the town was zombified. We were able to clear Mackinac City with a little bit of effort, and a little bit of expenditure of life, and probably way too much ammunition, and gasoline to get back and forth from there to friggin' Petoskey, where we had the train. But when, we left Mackinac and we started working on Pontaux Pins, I guess is how you pronounce that, building a city around Bayous Blanc, basically. That was our log cabin town. And that, when we finally went back to Mackinac, we found it was taken over by a group that had been pushed out of St. Ignace, which is on the other side of the bridge, which we had that bridge fortified. We didn't have to worry too much about people coming over because it was a long, long way and there were zombies in those cars, and we didn't want to deal with them, so they basically provided a natural defense to the people that were in St. Ignace. They got pushed out eventually, presumably by zombies, and moved over to Mackinac Island. And they managed to clear that place out, so I didn't want to know how many zombies were in St. Ignace. But we went back there and we were met with absolute hostility and just kind of told to leave. So we ended up working on our facilities up at Pontaux Pins and trying to rework on, a number of years later we were able to get the tracks back to Sheboygan and then to Mackinac. But that took a long damn time. That bridge was reopened after a long while, but it wasn't really our doing, the clearing out of St. Ignace. That was kind of Toronto Rail Lines. They spearheaded that. They weren't officially part of the Zombie Train Incorporated, but they sort of managed most of eastern Canada after a little while because we did a lot of trading, we did a lot of sharing of information and knowledge, and they ended up managing everything on that side of the border. Not to say that the border, again, meant anything anymore. And there may have been a couple of other little settlements out there. We always had people trickling back. We had, when we made it to Petoskey the first time, we broadcast like never before, saying, "Hey, we're in Petoskey, we're in Petoskey, we're in Petoskey. Come, if you want to get the hell out, if you want to get to civilization, you're gonna want to follow us now." And so we had people making the trek over a couple of days to come and catch the train. And there were quite a few people. There were probably a few thousand people that came out of the woodwork, but compared to a few thousand zombies, or at least. So, anyways, Train Man out.